She
You
hid the
cannot
bruises
protect
beneath
him
her
anymore.
veil, until the
Heed
Alpha
my
King
warning
lifted it
and
and
give them
said,
what they
"Never
want.
again." The people lived under the rule of King Alaric, a man both feared and admired, whose strength was as legendary as the storms that raged through the northern valleys. Tales of his cunning and power had spread far beyond the borders of the kingdom, but few knew the man behind the Iron Crown. Lady Seraphine moved through the grand halls of the royal castle like a shadow, her presence quiet and deliberate. She wore a veil that covered her face, a thin silk that shimmered like morning mist but hid the marks of a past that still haunted her. Whispers followed her wherever she went, soft murmurs of curiosity and pity, but she ignored them all. In the silence of her solitude, she carried the weight of scars, both seen and unseen, that no one else could understand. The grand hall was alive that evening. Candles flickered in golden sconces, throwing warm light across banners and tapestries. The nobles had gathered for the annual harvest masquerade, a celebration of bounty and power. Masks glinted in silver and gold, laughter floated through the air, and music wound like smoke around the pillars of the hall. Yet amidst the glittering crowd, Seraphine seemed untouchable, a ghost among the living. King Alaric watched from the raised dais, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with the patience of a predator. He had noticed her before, always at the edges of gatherings, always silent, always veiled. Something about her disturbed the air around him, a quiet pain that called to him in a way he could not ignore. He felt a pull he neither understood nor welcomed, a curiosity laced with the sharp edge of danger. The moment came when the two paths inevitably crossed. Seraphine moved to the edge of the ballroom, near the fountains that caught the reflections of candlelight like shards of glass. Alaric descended from the dais, his presence commanding the room to silence. The nobles parted instinctively, as if the air itself respected his authority. He stopped before her, his shadow stretching over the smooth stone floor. "You are far from the center of the celebration," he said, his voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of the throne. Seraphine looked up, her eyes meeting his through the veil. She felt the pull of his gaze, heavy and insistent, and a shiver passed through her. "I do not wish to be noticed, Your Majesty," she said softly, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Alaric's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Some things cannot remain hidden," he replied, reaching out with a hand that had commanded armies, settled kingdoms, and bent men to his will. It trembled, though slightly, as if even he was unsure of this touch. Before she could respond, his hand lifted the edge of her veil. The silk fell away, revealing the bruises and pale scars along her cheek and neck. The hall seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, Seraphine felt the entire world close in, the exposure unbearable. But Alaric's eyes did not recoil, nor did his hand withdraw. Instead, he whispered almost to himself, "Never again." The words were not for the court, nor for the nobility surrounding them. They were a promise to her and to himself. In that instant, the distance between them shrank. The weight of the veil, the weight of her past, seemed to lift, just slightly under his gaze. Whispers filled the hall, but Seraphine paid them no mind. She had spent years hiding in shadows, and though the light frightened her, there was something in Alaric's presence that offered warmth instead of pain. Yet even as a strange sense of safety began to stir within her, she could not forget the fear that lingered, the constant threat of the past returning. The king did not leave her side. He spoke softly, gently steering her toward a balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. "You cannot carry this alone," he said. "Not here, not in my kingdom, not anymore." Seraphine's heart pounded, but she remained cautious. "You do not know me, Your Majesty," she replied. "You do not know what I have endured." "I know enough," Alaric answered, his dark eyes unwavering. "I can see the pain even beneath the veil, and I will not allow it to continue. You will not endure alone." They stood in silence for a long moment, the night air cool against their skin. The distant sound of the city, of life moving on, was drowned by the beating of her heart. She wanted to believe him, wanted to allow herself the fragile hope that perhaps someone could see her as more than broken. Yet trust had always been a dangerous luxury. Why do you care?" she asked finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. Alaric did not hesitate. "Because no one should live in shadows when they have the strength to stand in the light," he said. "And because you are not what you have suffered. You are more than your scars. You are more than the veil." A faint warmth spread through Seraphine's chest. For the first time in years, she considered the possibility of being seen, not as a victim, but as a person, a woman who had survived. Yet even as hope kindled within her, the echo of her past reminded her that danger never truly sleeps. That danger arrived sooner than expected. A small, black envelope was slipped beneath her door the next morning. Inside was a single token, a broken shard of obsidian etched with runes that burned faintly in the light. No words, only the promise of a threat. The past, it seemed, would not release her so easily. Alaric's hand found hers before she could hide the token. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous, the kind of danger that commanded silence and fear. Seraphine met his gaze, and for the first time she did not turn away. "It is a warning," she said, "a reminder that the world is not done with me yet." "Then we face it," Alaric said, his jaw set. "Together." For the first time she felt the weight of the king's promise. "Together," she echoed, though uncertainty still lingered at the edges of her heart. The court continued its life as if nothing had happened. Nobles smiled and danced, unaware of the storm gathering quietly at the edges of the kingdom. Yet in the silence of the veiled corridors and the moonlit gardens, a connection had been forged, a bond of unspoken trust, of shared strength, and of a tentative hope that even in a world darkened by cruelty and power, some light could endure. Even as Seraphine adjusted her veil once more, there was a subtle shift within her. She could not yet claim freedom from fear, but for the first time she understood that she was not alone. And though the future remained uncertain, one truth shone clearer than any threat. Someone, at last, had lifted her veil and promised with the deepest sincerity that her suffering would not be hers to bear alone. The castle walls held their secrets tightly, but the night air carried whispers of change. And somewhere in the shadows, an unseen enemy waited, watching, plotting. Seraphine knew that her past was far from over, but with Alaric at her side, the fear that had defined her existence seemed, for the first time, like something that could be faced, and perhaps even conquered. The moon hung low over the gardens, casting silver light on fountains and stone paths. Seraphine and Alaric stood together in quiet, a fragile alliance formed in the space between trust and caution. Beyond the walls of the castle, storms brewed in the mountains, and the wind carried the scent of danger and mystery. Yet for now, in that moment, there was a pause, a fleeting peace, a promise of something more. And then, as if to remind them that shadows never sleep, a faint rustle in the darkened corridor caught Seraphine's attention. She turned her head, but there was nothing, only the soft whisper of silk against stone and the distant cry of an owl. Yet the unease lingered, curling in her chest like a serpent. Alaric noticed her glance. "Do not fear what you cannot yet see," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will face it, whatever it is, together." She nodded, though uncertainty remained. Something told her that the peace they had found was only temporary. Yet in Alaric's presence, she felt a small ember of hope, a spark that whispered that perhaps, for the first time in her life, someone would stand by her through the darkness. The night deepened and the castle slept, unaware of the storm that hovered on the horizon. Seraphine returned to her chambers, her veil in place, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. The bruises were still there, hidden beneath silk and shadow, but for the first time she sensed that perhaps they did not define her. Perhaps she could rise above them. And somewhere beyond the walls, in the silent halls of the castle, the king's promise echoed in her mind. Never again. The words lingered, a fragile shield against the unknown. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of trials yet to come. And in the darkness, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the veil to fall again. The morning after the harvest masquerade, the kingdom of Valemorn was wrapped in fog, as if the earth itself whispered secrets and warnings. Lady Seraphine sat by the tall, arched window of her chamber, staring at the mist that rolled over the castle gardens. The broken shard of obsidian, the mysterious token left under her door, lay on the table before her. Its black surface shimmered faintly, etched with runes that seemed almost alive. She did not understand its full meaning, but the warning it carried was unmistakable. She had survived much in her life, but something about this felt different, darker, closer, and unavoidable. Her past had always been a shadow trailing her steps, yet now that shadow had reached into her present. Seraphine knew she could not face it alone. The heavy knock at her door startled her. "Enter," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. King Alaric stepped into the room, his cloak brushing against the stone floor. Even in the morning light, he carried the aura of command. But now, away from the eyes of the court, there was a softer side to him, a side that spoke through careful words rather than authority. "You received it," he said, nodding toward the shard. Seraphine picked it up and turned it over in her hands. "Yes," she replied, her tone quiet but firm. "I do not know who sent it or why, but I feel that it is connected to everything I have tried to leave behind." Alaric's dark eyes softened. He took the shard gently from her hands and examined it. "These runes are old," he said, "very old. They speak of a curse that follows families, one that feeds on fear and shame. Your family name carries it, does it not?" Seraphine swallowed, her throat tight. "It does, and I have carried its weight for as long as I can remember. I thought I had escaped it. I thought hiding would be enough." "But it never is," Alaric said quietly, setting the shard on the table. "The shadows we try to avoid will always find us, especially when they sense fear." Her gaze met his, and for a moment the walls she had built around herself trembled. Alaric was unlike anyone she had ever met. He did not recoil from her scars, either visible or hidden. He did not shy away from the truth of her past. Instead, he faced it, offering a kind of strength she had never known she could trust. "I do not know if I am ready for this," she admitted. "If I am ready to face what has haunted my family for generations." "You are stronger than you realize," Alaric said. "Stronger than the shadows that haunt you, and you will not have to face them alone." His words were comforting, but the unease that had settled in her chest remained. The shard of obsidian seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive, and Seraphine could not shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the castle walls. "Then we must discover who sent this," Alaric said, his tone shifting from gentle to commanding. "And why now? We cannot wait for the darkness to strike again." They decided to begin with the royal archives, a vast library of ancient texts and forbidden knowledge. Seraphine had never spent much time among these books. They were filled with histories of kings and queens, magical artifacts, and curses that had shaped the fate of generations. Yet now, she felt a pull toward them, as if the answers to her past lay hidden in those dusty pages. As they entered the archives, Alaric led the way, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. Seraphine followed, her veil drawn back, revealing her face to the dim light. The air smelled of parchment and candle wax, old and comforting in its own way. Hours passed as they searched through scrolls and tomes, deciphering cryptic notes and symbols. Seraphine's fingers trembled slightly as she read aloud passages about ancient curses, family legacies, and the power of will. She discovered that her family had been marked by a curse tied to fear and secrecy, a curse that grew stronger each time pain was hidden instead of confronted. Alaric listened intently, his expression unreadable. "Then hiding was never truly an option," he said finally. "But facing it together, that can change everything." Seraphine nodded slowly, the words sinking in. For so long, she had believed that vulnerability was dangerous, that opening herself to others meant weakness. But with Alaric, the opposite felt true. His strength did not crush her, it held her. His presence did not frighten her, it anchored her. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the archives. Dust fell from the high shelves, and a shadow moved in the corner of the room. Seraphine's heart leapt into her throat. Alaric's hand went to his sword, his body tensing with readiness. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the silence. A figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, but before either of them could react, it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Only a faint whisper remained, a sound carried on the cold air of the room, almost like a warning. The past will not be ignored. Seraphine's hands shook, and she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the stone walls around them. "It knows," she whispered. "It knows I am here." Alaric placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Then we will face it together." The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Servants moved quietly through the castle, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Seraphine and Alaric consulted maps, ancient records, and magical texts, piecing together a trail that led deep into the forests surrounding Valemorn. They discovered that the shard was only the first sign of a growing danger, one tied to both Seraphine's family legacy and a rival faction that had long coveted the throne. That night, as Seraphine prepared for bed, she could not sleep. The castle was silent, but the shadows felt alive. She wrapped her veil around her face once more, as if it could shield her from the unseen threat. Yet even with the veil, she felt the weight of the shard, the weight of the curse, pressing against her mind. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Alaric, holding a candle and wearing a cloak that seemed heavier than usual, as if it carried the burden of the entire kingdom. "I could not leave you alone tonight," he said. His voice was low, almost hesitant, yet full of authority. "The danger is real, but so is the promise I made. Never again. Do you remember?" Seraphine nodded, her lips trembling. "I remember." Alaric stepped into the room, his eyes searching hers. "You are not alone in this," he said, moving closer. "And no matter what comes, I will not let anything harm you, not the curse, not the shadows, not anyone." For a moment they stood there in the quiet candlelight, the air between them thick with unspoken emotions. Seraphine felt a warmth spread through her chest, a combination of fear, hope, and something new, something dangerous in its own way, trust. "I want to believe you," she whispered, "but it is so hard to trust again." Alaric reached out, gently lifting her veil once more. "Then let us start here," he said softly. "Not with words, but with trust, with courage, together." The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and Seraphine felt a fragile sense of courage bloom within her. She did not know what the night would bring, nor the trials that awaited her. But for the first time in a long time, she felt that she might survive, and perhaps she might even find a reason to hope. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the wall, a figure fleeting, almost impossible to see. Seraphine froze. Alaric's hand went to hers, gripping it firmly. "Do not be afraid," he said, though his own senses were alert. The shadow disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving only the faintest echo of movement and a cold breeze. Seraphine swallowed, her pulse quickening. "It is coming," she said quietly. "Whatever this is, it knows we are here." Alaric nodded. "Then we will be ready." The next day, they prepared to venture into the forests, to follow the trail left by the shard and uncover the source of the curse. Horses were readied, maps studied, and spells prepared to protect them. Seraphine felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The forest was dangerous, full of secrets and creatures long thought to be legends, but it was also the path to her freedom. As they rode toward the edge of the kingdom, the morning mist curling around them like a living thing, Seraphine realized that her life had changed. She was no longer hiding behind walls and veils. She was stepping into the unknown, with a man who had promised to stand by her, through darkness and light alike. And deep in the shadows of Valemorn, unseen eyes watched their departure, calculating, waiting. The storm was far from over, and the veil of secrets that had protected Seraphine for so long was about to be lifted entirely. The journey had begun. The forest surrounding Valemorn was alive in ways that the common folk could never understand. Trees twisted skyward like fingers clawing at the clouds, their roots tangled in shadows that moved even when the wind was still. Mist clung to the ground, curling around rocks and fallen leaves like a living thing. The deeper Seraphine and Alaric rode, the heavier the air felt, thick with whispers of magic and secrets older than the kingdom itself. Seraphine's hands trembled slightly as she held the reins of her horse. The forest was both beautiful and terrifying, a place where every rustle of leaves could hide danger. Yet beneath the fear, there was a strange thrill. For the first time in years, she felt alive, as if her life had finally moved from the shadows into something real. Alaric rode beside her, his presence a steadying force. He did not speak, allowing her to settle her thoughts while remaining close enough that she could sense his strength and his attention. The journey was not just through the forest, it was also into the unknown corners of themselves, the unspoken fears and desires that had shaped them. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. The map they carried marked a hidden temple, a place rumored to be ancient even by Valemorn standards. Legend said it was built by those who had once wielded magic to protect the kingdom from curses, a sanctuary and a prison both. This temple was where Seraphine's family curse had been traced, and where they might find the key to its unraveling. When the temple finally emerged from the mist, it was more magnificent than Seraphine had imagined. Towers of carved stone jutted into the sky, covered in moss and creeping vines. Symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. The air itself thrummed with energy, and Seraphine felt the weight of generations pressing down on her. "This is it," Alaric said, dismounting his horse. "Whatever waits inside, we face it together." Seraphine nodded, her hands tightening on the reins. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of Alaric's promise. He was not just offering protection. He was offering partnership, a shared strength against forces neither of them fully understood. The temple doors were massive, carved with intricate runes that seemed to pulse when Seraphine touched them. As they entered, a faint hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone floors and walls. Inside, the temple was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each more mysterious than the last. Shadows clung to the corners, and the faint glow of runes illuminated the path ahead like a trail of stars in a dark sky. "This place feels alive," Seraphine whispered. "It's as if it knows we are here," Alaric nodded. "And it knows why we are here. That is why it will test us." Their first trial came quickly. A narrow corridor twisted and turned, the walls seeming to close in as they moved forward. Whispers echoed from unseen corners, voices that sounded like Seraphine's own fears speaking back to her. She froze, clutching Alaric's arm. "You must not let it control you," Alaric said, his voice calm but firm. "Fear is part of the curse, but it will not defeat you if you face it." Seraphine took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. The whispers tried to pierce her mind, drawing up memories of pain, of loneliness, of every moment she had ever felt weak. But she forced herself forward, step by step, guided by Alaric's steady presence. The corridor opened into a large chamber, its walls covered in glowing runes that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it, a black crystal that seemed to absorb the light around it. The crystal radiated a cold, dark energy, and Seraphine felt a chill creep up her spine. "This must be the source," she said quietly, "the heart of the curse." Alaric placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can face it. You must." She approached the pedestal, her steps slow but determined. The crystal's energy seemed to reach into her mind, stirring doubts and fears. Memories of her past, of the pain she had endured, rose like a tide. She felt herself falter, her courage threatening to break. "Remember," Alaric said, his voice firm yet filled with warmth, "you are not alone. Not now, not ever." His words gave her strength. She reached out and touched the crystal. A shock of energy ran through her and she gasped. The shadows around her seemed to writhe and twist, forming shapes of people she had known, faces of those who had hurt her, faces of those she feared she would never escape. But she did not pull away. Instead, she drew on the promise Alaric had made, the promise that they would face the darkness together. With a deep breath, she focused on her own strength, on the courage she had found within herself. The crystal shivered beneath her touch, then cracked, sending a ripple of light through the chamber. The shadows dissolved, leaving only the faint glow of the runes. Seraphine fell to her knees, exhausted but alive. Alaric knelt beside her, helping her to her feet. "You did it," he said, his eyes full of admiration and relief. "You faced it and you did not break." Her chest heaved with breath she did not realize she had been holding. "I could not have done it alone," she admitted, her voice soft. "I could not have faced it without you." Alaric's gaze softened. "Nor could I have faced it without you. Strength is not in standing alone. It is in standing together." They stayed in the temple chamber until the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the stone. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the curse slightly lifted. Yet, even as they prepared to leave, a new sense of unease settled over them. The shadows had been only part of the test. The crystal had cracked, yes, but it had not been destroyed. A faint whisper of dark energy lingered in the temple, a reminder that the curse was not gone entirely. Something more awaited them beyond the forest, beyond the walls of the kingdom, and it would not be kind. As they emerged from the temple, the forest seemed to breathe around them. Mist curled around their feet, and the trees swayed as if acknowledging their passage. Alaric's hand rested lightly on the small of Seraphine's back, guiding her through the undergrowth. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, and a strange sense of closeness to the king. For the first time, their relationship had shifted. No longer were they simply king and noblewoman, bound by duty and circumstance. They were partners, allies in the truest sense, facing a world of darkness together. And beneath that partnership was a growing bond, a quiet recognition of feelings that neither dared to speak aloud. As night fell, they made camp in a small clearing. The fire crackled between them, casting warm light on their faces. Seraphine sat quietly, tending to her horse while Alaric sharpened his sword. The silence between them was comfortable, but charged with unspoken emotion. "You have changed," Alaric said finally, breaking the quiet. "Since the temple, I mean." Seraphine looked up, meeting his gaze. "I feel lighter," she admitted, "but also more aware, stronger, and yet afraid." "Fear is not weakness," he said. "It is part of being human. The strength is in what you do despite it." She nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. "And you have shown me that strength can be gentle too, that it can protect rather than control." Alaric's eyes softened. "And you have shown me that courage is not just in wielding a sword or ruling a kingdom. It is in standing against the darkness within yourself and refusing to let it take you." For a moment, the forest around them fell silent, as if holding its breath. They sat together by the fire, the warmth between them more than just from the flames. It was a connection born of shared trials, of vulnerability, and of a trust that neither had expected to find. But even as they shared this quiet intimacy, danger lingered. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, unseen eyes watched them, calculating and patient. The rival forces that had sent the shard to Seraphine had not abandoned their pursuit. The curse was not yet defeated, and the forest held secrets they could not yet fathom. Alaric rose, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "Rest now," he said. "We face the dawn together, and whatever comes, we face it as one." Seraphine watched him, her heart full of conflicting emotions, fear, hope, and something that could only be described as longing. She knew the road ahead would be treacherous, filled with trials that would test every ounce of their courage and every bond they had forged. Yet, for the first time, she felt that she could meet it. She was no longer running. She was standing, and she was not alone. As the firelight flickered across their faces, Seraphine whispered a quiet prayer, not for safety, not for ease, but for the courage to face whatever darkness lay ahead. Somewhere beyond the trees, a shadow moved, silent and patient. The true trial had only just begun. The first light of dawn seeped through the dense canopy of the Veilmorn forest, turning the mist into rivers of gold and silver. Lady Seraphine and King Alaric rode silently, their horses' hooves muffled against the soft, damp earth. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the forest itself waited for the confrontation that lay ahead. They approached a clearing where the trees arched like sentinels, forming a natural cathedral. In the center stood a stone altar, blackened by age and covered in glowing runes. The air around it shimmered, charged with an energy that made Seraphine's skin tingle. This was the heart of the curse, the source of the dark power that had haunted her family for generations. Alaric dismounted, his eyes scanning the clearing. "Stay close," he whispered. "Whatever awaits us here will not fight fair." Seraphine nodded, her hands trembling slightly on the reins. Fear lingered in the back of her mind, but beneath it, a growing confidence took root. She had faced her fears in the temple and survived. Now she would face the curse itself. The shadows moved first. A wave of darkness rose from the altar, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. Faces of ancestors, distorted by centuries of pain and anger, glared at Seraphine, whispering accusations and fear into her mind. She froze, memories of past failures and regrets flashing before her eyes. "Remember," Alaric said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder, "you are not alone, not now, not ever." The words anchored her and she drew a deep breath. "I am stronger than my fear," she said aloud, her voice trembling but steady. "I am more than my past." The shadows lunged, rushing toward her in a swirl of darkness. Alaric stepped forward, sword raised, cutting through the nearest forms with precision and strength. But the shadows were many, and they reformed as quickly as they were struck. Seraphine closed her eyes and focused, recalling the lessons of the temple. She placed her hands on the ground, feeling the energy beneath her, the pulse of the earth, the magic that had been waiting for someone who could wield it with courage. Light began to radiate from her palms, soft at first, then growing brighter, pushing back the darkness inch by inch. Alaric watched in awe as the woman he had come to admire and care for stood before him, no longer just the lady in the veil, but a force to be reckoned with. "You can do this," he said, his voice steady, full of conviction. "I will stand with you." The shadows recoiled at the light, writhing and twisting, but they were not defeated. They surged again, testing her resolve, clawing at her mind, dragging up every fear and insecurity she had ever known. Her knees buckled and she felt the pull of despair. Alaric stepped closer, gripping her hands in his. "Do not let them win," he urged. "We are stronger together. Focus on us, on what we have built. Our bond is stronger than any curse." The words ignited a spark within her. She looked into his eyes, finding trust, patience, and unwavering support. With renewed determination, she directed the energy through her body, channeling every ounce of courage, love, and hope she had. A brilliant beam of light shot from her hands, striking the heart of the altar. The shadows screamed, dissolving into nothingness as the dark energy was swallowed by the light. For a moment, silence reigned. The clearing was still, the mist lifting as if the forest itself sighed in relief. Seraphine collapsed to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Alaric knelt beside her, lifting her gently to her feet. "You did it," he said softly, his hand resting over hers. "You faced it and did not falter." She looked up at him, tears of relief and disbelief in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Alaric's gaze lingered on her face, his dark eyes reflecting both pride and something deeper, something unspoken yet profoundly felt. "Yes, together," he agreed, his voice low, almost tender. They rested briefly in the clearing, allowing the light of victory to wash over them. The forest seemed less threatening now, its shadows no longer alive with malice. The curse that had haunted Seraphine's family for generations was broken, its power diminished. But the experience had changed them both, leaving scars not of pain, but of growth and strength. As they prepared to return to the kingdom, Seraphine spoke softly, almost to herself. "I understand now. The veil I wore, it protected me from being seen, but it also kept me from living, from trusting, from loving." Alaric's hand brushed hers. "And now you do not have to hide," he said. "Not from me, not from the world. You are strong, beautiful, and brave. You are not defined by what you have endured." A small smile touched her lips. For the first time she felt fully seen, not as a victim, not as a noblewoman burdened by expectations, but as a person capable of courage, love, and choice. The journey back to Valemorn was quiet but full of meaning. The forest that had once seemed menacing now felt protective, as if acknowledging their triumph. Alaric rode close, never letting her out of his sight, and Seraphine found comfort in the steady rhythm of his presence. By the time the castle appeared through the trees, the sun had risen fully, casting golden light over the stone walls. The kingdom had woken to a new day, unaware of the trials their king and the veiled lady had faced. Yet Seraphine felt that change was not just in the castle walls but within her, and within the man who had stood beside her. Back in the royal chambers, they were greeted by the court, curious about their absence. But Seraphine no longer felt the need to hide. She removed her veil completely, letting her hair fall freely over her shoulders. The courtiers gasped softly, but Alaric's hand found hers again, steadying her. "You are safe," he whispered, a smile touching his lips, "and you are free." Seraphine's gaze met his, and in that moment there was no fear, no doubt, only a shared understanding. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, not just as king and lady, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and the quiet strength of love. Days passed, and the kingdom thrived. The shadow of the curse no longer lingered, and Seraphine became an active presence at court, her confidence growing with each passing day. She had learned that strength did not mean isolation, and that vulnerability could be a source of power when shared with someone who truly cared. Alaric watched her with admiration, sometimes quietly, sometimes openly, always aware of the bond that had formed in the trials of the forest and the temple. He, too, had changed. He had learned that leadership was not only about command, but about empathy and trust. He had discovered that love was not weakness, but a force that could strengthen the soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky blazed with shades of crimson and gold, Seraphine and Alaric stood on the balcony of the castle. The wind carried the scent of the forest, now calm and protective, and the distant mountains glowed in the last light of day. "Do you ever fear that it will return?" Seraphine asked quietly, her hand brushing the cool stone of the balcony. Alaric placed his hand over hers. "The darkness may try again," he said, "but we are ready. We have faced it together, and together we will stand against anything that comes. Fear has no power over us when we face it as one." She smiled, a mixture of relief and quiet joy. "I think I finally understand what it means to be free, not just from the curse but from my own doubts and fears." "And you are not alone," Alaric added softly. "Never again will you face the darkness without me." For the first time, Seraphine felt the full weight of that promise. She did not need to hide behind veils or walls. She had survived, she had fought, and she had found a bond stronger than fear, stronger than shadows. She had found love and courage intertwined, a light that could never be extinguished. The stars began to appear in the night sky, one by one, as if blessing their victory. Seraphine leaned her head slightly against Alaric's shoulder, feeling a peace she had never known. The kingdom was safe, the curse broken, and the bond they shared had transformed them both. But beyond the castle walls in the distant mountains, a faint whisper of wind carried the memory of shadows. It was a reminder that vigilance and courage were eternal, and that true strength lay in the heart of those who dared to face the darkness with love, hope, and unyielding trust. And together they stood on the balcony, rulers of a kingdom, partners in life and love, ready to meet whatever the future might hold together.